My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. The late 1960s were a time of great change in the world. After a decade that witnessed the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, many were looking for answers to the unanswerable questions, for love and for peace. For some, those answers came from experimentation with mind-altering drugs. Others sought answers with mindfulness, introspection, and meditation. Celebrities including the Beatles, Donovan, Mike Love of the Beach Boys, and actress Mia Farrow traveled to India to study transcendental meditation with Guru Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. This past November marked the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' White Album, and many of the songs were written or inspired by their time with Maharishi. What was that experience like, and how did it change not only the Beatles, but millions of other seekers? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dr. Susan Shumsky, had a literal ringside seat to this experience. Susan spent 22 years in the ashrams and 6 years on the personal staff of Maharishi. A rare insider, Susan shares the secrets of that time, Maharishi's influence on the Beatles, their lyrics, and the TM movement in her book, Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. Susan has dedicated her life to helping people take command of their lives in highly effective, powerful, and positive ways. She's the best-selling author of 14 books, a pioneer in the human potential field. She has more than 50 years teaching thousands of people meditation, prayer, affirmation, intuition. Her book titles have included Divine Revelation, as well as Exploring Meditation, Exploring Auras, Exploring Chakras, How to Hear the Voice of God, and Color Your Chakras. Tonight, we will be discussing her memoir of her time with Maharishi entitled Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. Please welcome back to Destination Unlimited, Dr. Susan Shumsky. Good evening, Susan.
Good evening to you, Victor. I'm so glad to be here with you today.
And wonderful to have you back. The last time you were on, 2 years ago, we were discussing Color Your Chakras, and I recall mentioning how you and I first met when we were both children about 23 years ago at a wonderful weekend workshop you taught here in New York after the publication of Divine Revelation. And listeners, just know we're still a couple of flower children, aren't we, Susan?
Absolutely. I am very proud of my hippie status. I am a gypsy hippie flower child and always will be.
Absolutely. I didn't have the gypsy status, but I have the other status, so I'll take that along with you. Now, prior to Maharishi's first trip to the United States in 1959, words like yoga, meditation, and mantra were not commonly known. How did he bring these disciplines to the public's attention?
With a little help from his friends, the Beatles. That's how. When the Beatles learned transcendental meditation, they wanted to spread the word to everyone. In fact, John Lennon suggested that they go on tour to, quote unquote, turn on everyone to transcendental meditation. So just because of their status of being the biggest act since Moses parted the Red Sea, because of that, they were able to publicize Maharishi to the world, and Maharishi became incredibly famous. Transcendental meditation became sought after by millions of people.
What was the difference between transcendental meditation and other forms that had been practiced prior to that time?
Well, in the United States, I would say that there weren't any other meditation practices really practiced before that time. What transcendental meditation was, it is from India. It is Hindu. It is a practice that uses mantra And mantras have been used in India for millennia. The difference between Maharishi's use of mantras and the other use of mantras, I think, is mostly the mantras were chanted, or the mantras were focused. There was a focus, attention, concentration on the mantras, whereas Maharishi taught people how to meditate in a very relaxed way, where they would think the mantra, but then they would allow it to just take its own course. And it would be a very relaxing experience, and there's no concentrating, there's no focus, there's no expectations. It's just a very relaxed practice and an easy practice for everyone to do.
Now, the mantra, the famous mantra is chanting Om, obviously, but in Transcendental meditation, each disciple was given their own mantra. Is that correct?
Yes, when people learned Transcendental meditation, they were given a specific mantra for them, and Om wasn't one of the mantras that they were given. In fact, Om is never used in the Transcendental meditation program at all.
Now, what had been your personal experience with meditation before studying TM?
You know, it was the 60s, and at that time we were seeking higher consciousness. We were seeking to experience altered states. And people like Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who wrote the book, The Psychedelic Experience, they said we could get this experience, the experience of nirvana, which is the end-all, be-all experience of meditation, that we could get that through LSD. Well, that didn't work out too well for me. As a matter of fact, I never came down from the drug for months, and I had continuous LSD flashbacks. It was a terrifying experience for me. It was horrendous. It definitely was not higher consciousness. It definitely was not nirvana or anything remotely similar. But I did try to meditate a little bit. I was reading a lot of books about meditation and higher consciousness, such as The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, the Buddhist scriptures. I was reading books by Alan Watts, such as The Way of Zen. And he said in his books that you need to find a quote-unquote meditation guide. Well, good luck in, 1966 Berkeley, California, going to the yellow pages and looking for meditation guide or anything remotely similar. That just didn't exist. So a friend said to me, well, have you ever tried to meditate on your own? So I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I lay down on my bed. That's how clueless I was. I didn't even know you're supposed to sit up when you meditate. But I lay on my bed and I sort of prayed for or asked for a meditation. Immediately, I was propelled into this ecstatic state. I could feel this cord or rush of energy rushing from the tips of my toes all the way to the top of my head. I was not on drugs, but I was having this experience. And I figured, well, I guess this is meditation. Little did I know that not only had I had my first meditation experience, but also Kundalini Awakening at the same time. And Kundalini is a very, supposedly very rare and difficult to attain experience. So that was my first meditation.
Yeah, please explain to our listeners who are not familiar with the term what Kundalini is.
Well, it actually means curled up energy, and it's an energy that's at the base of the spine. In average individuals, it actually remains asleep. And unless you do a spiritual practice, usually it does not awaken. But through practicing, for example, breathing exercises or meditation practices or some yogic practices, you can awaken Kundalini, and then it travels up through your spine up to the top of your head. And it's in your subtle body, actually. It's not even in your gross physical body.
What was that like, that feeling for you? Can you describe it even?
Well, it felt like an ecstatic energy that was flowing through my body, like I was plugged into an electric socket, but in a most ecstatic way. So it just felt like the energy flowing up through my body.
And what was the aftermath of that experience?
Well, I tried to get it again, but I didn't really. So, but I happily, luckily, a friend took me to the Transcendental Meditation Center in Berkeley, California, And as soon as I saw the picture of the guru on the wall, who was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and just this beaming energy beaming out of his eyes from the wall, from the picture on the wall, I knew, okay, this is where I'm going to learn real meditation. This is real. And I just had this feeling about him that this would be my path.
And how did you make the transformation from being a flower child in San Francisco to a disciple and personal staffer of the Maharishi?
Yeah, so what I did is, as soon as I began to meditate, I was so impressed by the results. Transformation was huge. It was like day and night. So I was so impressed that I wanted to become a Transcendental meditation teacher right away. So I kept applying to go to the courses that were in India, that Maharishi was teaching in Rishikesh, India, in the foothills of the Himalayas. And I kept applying year after year, and I kept getting rejected because they said I was too young. They would only allow people who had graduated college and were already like 24 years old to go on the course, and I just wasn't there yet. But then finally in 1970, the course was happening, and Maharishi allowed the younger students to go. So that's when I went to Rishikesh, India, and I spent 6 months there at that time. 3 months on the course and 3 months after that hanging out with Maharishi. So I got to know Maharishi. Since I stayed with him, there were only a handful of people that were there at that time. So I stayed with him and eventually asked him if I could be on his international staff.
My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dr. Susan Shumsky, we're talking about her book, Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru, and we'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Teens in foster care will love you, even if you don't know the lingo.
Dad bod. Noun. The result of the occasional donut, always washed down with confidence.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council. Visit adoptuskids.org.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this evening is Dr. Susan Shumsky. She's the author of Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. So you had mentioned how you had applied for the Transcendental Meditation Teachers Program in India with the Maharishi. You had been turned down a couple of times because of your age, and finally you got acceptance. You went to India. What was your first experience with the Maharishi like?
Well, actually, my first experience with Maharishi was in 1967, where I met him in Los Angeles at the airport and went to his lecture there. But when I went to India, the experience of being there at that ashram was quite amazing. It was set on the banks of the Ganges River, up on a high cliff overlooking the Ganges. It's a beautiful view, beautiful atmosphere. It was in the jungle. There were a lot of monkeys, there were crows, peacocks, there were scorpions, millipedes, centipedes. You know, it was the jungle. And it was quite primitive. The place there was cinder block and concrete construction, just these rooms, outdoor showers, outdoor toilets. So it was a very basic kind of place. But I was in bliss. It didn't matter. I was with Maharishi. I was wallowing in his darshan, in his essence. I was experiencing him firsthand, and it was incredibly powerful. He was the happiest person I'd ever met in my life. He was always laughing. In fact, the reporters called him the Giggling Guru because he was continually laughing and cracking jokes all the time and laughing at his own jokes. And also, he was he had this amazing energy field, this amazing aura. He exuded divine love. He exuded this really powerful energy. In India, they call it Shakti. And the transmission of energy from master to disciple is also a tradition in India where you're receiving this amazing spiritual energy through osmosis, and you just feel like you're being bathed in waves of bliss, waves of grace, waves of incredible spiritual power. So everybody wanted to get close to him, and that's what it was like being around him, that you were just being showered with these waves of bliss.
In the beginning of the first segment, you had mentioned that you had seen a portrait of the Maharishi, and in that moment that you saw the portrait of the Maharishi, you were also sensing that energy, weren't you?
Yes, it was like through his eyes, he was transmitting this amazing energy. Even in the photograph, I could sense that. And so that was really the reason why I learned TM in the first place.
Now, I remember you sharing that you spent 5 to 20 hours a day meditating and often went for weeks without leaving your room. What made you adopt that hermit-like ascetic approach?
Well, yeah, in the beginning, way back in the 60s, Maharishi would tell people to spend just hours and hours and hours in meditation. And so I would meditate many hours, and I think the reason why I adopted it is because I loved meditation. I love meditation really more than anything else. And I was having wonderful experiences while I was meditating. So I became very hermetic-like, hermit-like. And I really was very introverted. So I loved just hanging out by myself and meditating hour upon hour upon hour. Now, as far as I know, I shouldn't say as far as I definitely know that now people are not advised to meditate as many hours as we used to way back then in the Transcendental meditation practice or organization. But even from the beginning, the idea for the general population was to meditate 20 minutes twice a day, to do transcendental meditation for that long. It was, just 20 minutes twice a day, meditate, and then the rest of your day do whatever you want, and your life will improve. And I found that to be true.
But getting back to that period of your life when you were doing that extensive meditation, having food brought to your room, never leaving your room, was that transitional for you? Did that make a change in you?
I think everything that I did in reference to Maharishi and in reference to Transcendental meditation made tremendous changes, tremendous transformation in me, in the sense that I became a lot more peaceful inside, and I became much more attuned to myself and realizing more about myself. It wasn't really until after I left the Transcendental Meditation Organization, which was 1989, when I eventually left, that's when really I transformed even more, because I became much more self-empowered and less dependent upon external things like the guru, the organization, and so on.
Now, what was it like at Maharishi's ashram in Rishikesh? Describe it for us, please, inside.
Right. So, as I was saying, it was up on this cliff. It was on the banks of the Ganges. There was a lecture hall on the property where Maharishi gave his lectures, and there was a dining room. There were several barracks that people stayed. We all stayed one person per room. The rooms were quite small, maybe 10 by 12, something like that, feet, and quite basic. There would be a cot, a chair, a table, and some shelving in each room. There were a lot of flowers and trees, and it was in the middle of a jungle, but it was landscaped. There was pathways, dirt pathways. There were stones, whitewashed stones on the exterior of these pathways so that you could see even at night as you were walking through the ashram. Maharishi's home was very basic also, just simple cinder block and concrete construction. And on his roof, we would meet with Maharishi on the roof after the course was over, and there was only just a handful of people. We would meet up there every night. And also, Maharishi was always building. It was like in continual construction. And he would be personally like the contractor. He would be telling everyone what to do and where to put this stone and where to put this brick and put this cement here and there. And he tried to build several streams on the ashram, at the ashram. And he tried to engineer pools, but unfortunately the streams in the pools went against gravity, so it didn't really work very well. In fact, he tried to even construct a swimming pool, and halfway through the construction, they had to stop and fill it in because it went against gravity. It didn't work. But
now, I remember reading that you were talking about the dining room there, and that obviously you all were eating a vegetarian diet at the time, but you also had to share your meals with some of the holy monkeys.
Well, the thing was, when I was there in 1970, we had an actual dining room, and there were three wings to the dining room. There was the smokers' dining room, there was the talkers' dining room, and there was the silent dining room. So if you were in silence and you didn't speak, you'd go to the silent dining room. I didn't ever go there because I wasn't in silence when I was there. But some people did go to the silent dining room. Now, as far as outdoors, though, if you were outdoors, in the outdoors dining, when the Beatles were there in 1968, that dining room had not been built yet. So they were sharing their meals with the monkeys. The monkeys would come and snatch meals off the table when the Beatles were there.
And the monkeys are considered to be holy because there's a Hindu deity, Hanuman, who's a monkey, right?
No, that's true. Yeah. I mean, Hanuman is a deity in India, which is the monkey god. I don't know that all monkeys are really considered holy, though. The monkeys were definitely present. They were jumping up and down on the roof of my bungalow quite a bit when I was there. And there was also very loud crows and peacocks. They're all very loud birds.
So we can jokingly say that the monkeys actually were with the Maharishi before the Beatles arrived.
That's
literally
true, for sure.
That's funny. Now, you had mentioned that the press had referred to him or had dubbed him the Giggling Guru, but he also was a disciplinarian, wasn't he? He had a darker side.
Well, he had a stricter side. Let's put it that way.
Stricter side, yeah.
He was like a military drill instructor, really. You know how when you see it portrayed in movies and so on, or if you've ever been in the military, you experience that the drill instructors are very strict. They actually use psychological ways to try to tear down your ego, tear down your sense of self, and try to rebuild you into a better version of yourself. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But they do it through very, very harsh means. Well, Maharishi was the same way. those of us who were on staff, he didn't do this for the general public, believe me. In the general public, he was just this happy, smiling all the time guru who was trying to promote transcendental meditation. But if you got to know him and if you were in his inner circle like I was, he was, let's put it this way. He described himself as the carpenter and his disciples were pieces of wood. So if a carpenter is carving a piece of wood and making it into something beautiful and something glorious, something aesthetically pleasing, and improving that piece of wood by bringing out its full potential, let's say, it's not really very comfortable to be carved up. As you're being carved up, you're experiencing heaven and hell, a combination of heaven, sometimes hell. That's what it was like to be around Maharishi as a close disciple, which is what I was.
My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dr. Susan Shumsky. We're talking about her book, Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. Susan, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Well, my website is drsusan.org. That's drsusan.org. And I have another website also, which is divinetravels.com. That's DIVINETRAVELS. That's plural on the travels, divinetravels.com. You can get the book Maharishi and Me on any online bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. There's a lot of places online, Indie, so many places online that you can get the book. I suggest you get it at Amazon because it's the fastest way to get it and the least expensive.
And we'll be back with more of Dr. Susan Shumsky and me, Maharishi and Me, after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
You're listening to OTR FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers. But that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on adoption, visit adoptuskids.org. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Susan Shumsky. She's the author of Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. Susan, what was the atmosphere like in Rishikesh before the arrival of the Beatles, Mia Farrow, and other celebrities?
Well, before the Beatles came to Rishikesh, Maharishi had taught other teacher training courses. They were very small. When the Beatles arrived, there were about 60 people on that course, and none of them knew that the Beatles were going to come. You know, nobody had advance notice that the Beatles would be coming there. But Maharishi flew to India with Mia Farrow and her sister, dear Prudence Farrow. I call her dear Prudence Farrow. And they arrived in January of 1968. As soon as they arrived, Mia became Maharishi's darling, shall we say. He placed all kinds of attention on her. He would make her come and sit up on the stage, and he would ask her questions, which embarrassed her. She had just learned Transcendental meditation. In fact, she learned in Mumbai. It was known as Bombay at the time. She learned there on the way to the ashram. So she was a completely new meditator. And she described the ashram as being like a graveyard. And she said she was bored out of her mind when she was there because she didn't really have anything to do. She had just learned meditation. She wasn't meditating for hours and hours a day like the other students. And so she would go sit by the Ganges and read a book, or she would go shopping. One day she brought back a puppy and asked Maharishi if she could keep it, and he told her she could, and he named it Arjuna. So she had a little puppy who was taken care of, but she was basically kind of bored.
Why do you think he paid so much special attention to Mia Farrow?
Because she was a celebrity, and he wanted to... He was always making up to celebrities because he knew that they would further his cause. You know, all he wanted to do was get as many people as possible to meditate, and he figured if he would court these celebrities, that would be helpful.
We often think, I'm sorry.
To his spreading the word, you know.
We often think of George Harrison as the most spiritual of the Beatles, yet you say the Maharishi did not consider him to be the best meditator. Who was and why?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, Maharishi said that Ringo is always in meditation and goes by feeling and heart. But as for the other Beatles, too much brain is in the way.
That's interesting. And Ringo was actually one of the first to leave, right?
Yeah, he left Rishikesh after 10 days, not because he didn't like it there. He did like it there, but unfortunately his wife hated it. She hated the bugs. She was actually terrified of the bugs. And also they had two very, very young children at home. One of them was only 6 months old. And so they had to get back to their kids, really.
Much of the music that became the White Album was conceived and composed while the Beatles were in Rishikesh. What was it about their experience there that resulted in this spurt of creativity?
I think it was because they were free from Beatlemaniacs, and they were free to actually relax, free from the press, and they could have an actual vacation, which they really never took. And the vacation lasted quite a while, so they were able to just be in a very, very creative space as a result of that atmosphere at the ashram, which was really a heavenly kind of atmosphere. And I think that inspired them to write. In fact, John said it was an incredibly creative period for him. He claimed he wrote hundreds of songs. He said the songs were just going hummity in his head all the time. And so he just was writing songs.
Now, Donovan taught John Lennon finger-picking on the guitar, which he used on the White Album. What was Donovan's relationship like with the Beatles?
Yeah, I mean, Donovan was a friend of the Beatles. It wasn't a close friend, but he was there when the Beatles were there in India. And so they did hang out with him. They played music with him. And also, this is interesting, Donovan claims that he suggested to the Beatles that they were so famous that their next album could have no image on the cover, just be a plain white cover and not have any kind of title. So he claims that he was actually the person that thought of that White Album concept.
Many of his songs also were written when he was there in Rishikesh, weren't they?
He was also writing songs there. And some of the songs that he had written in the past were about Maharishi, such as Hurdy-Gurdy Man, and Happiness Runs is about transcendental meditation. And Jennifer Juniper is about Jenny Boyd, and she was also there in Rishikesh as well. But actually, Donovan had a crush on Mia Farrow when they were in India.
Mm. Now, you share in Maharishi and Me that many of the songs they composed had hidden meanings related to their experience there. Let's discuss a few of them. Who took their broken wings and learned to fly in Blackbird?
Right. So Blackbird, when that came out on the White Album, originally, Paul said that it was inspired by hearing a crow early in the morning in Rishikesh. But years later, he changed his tune about that, so to speak, and he said that it was about the civil rights movement and a black bird, meaning a black woman. A bird, that was an expression they used in England for a female. So black female in the civil rights movement. That actually happens to be my favorite song on the entire album. I think it's a gorgeous song.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And who was Mother Nature's son?
So actually, we're all Mother Nature's son. And Mother Nature's son came as a result of Maharishi giving a lecture about Mother Nature. He often would talk about Mother Nature and us being children of nature and that sort of thing. So Mother Nature's Son, written by Paul McCartney, and Child of Nature, written by John Lennon, came as a result of that lecture that Maharishi gave that touched them deeply.
Now, My Sweet Lord was one of George's most memorable songs. How did that song come to be?
That song is actually, has a couple of different meanings in it. Is obviously a devotional song, and George was a very devotional person, and he was, in fact, studying, after he left Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he went and studied with Prabhupada, who was the founder of ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And so in this song, My Sweet Lord, we have Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. So that was the chant used by the ISKCON, the chant used by the Hare Krishna organization. So that's in the song. But also in that song, which is really interesting, we have Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Mahashvara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Now those words, Sanskrit words, come directly from the puja ceremony that Maharishi taught the Beatles and the other course participants in India, in Rishikesh, on their course in 1968. The puja ceremony is the ceremony that TM teachers chant whenever a new person learns transcendental meditation. So the Beatles, John and George, who were still in the ashram, they learned those words. They learned how to chant the puja. So that is directly from learning from Maharishi that was in that song. Now, let me give you the translation of that. It goes like this. The Guru is Brahma, Vishnu, and the great Lord Shiva. The Guru is the eternal Brahman, the transcendental absolute. I bow to the supreme Guru, adorned with glory.
Now, Paul had left, Ringo had left, John and George were still there.
Right.
But then there was some dissension. What happened?
Okay, well, there's three reasons that John and George left Rishikesh in a huff. And I'll talk about one of those reasons. One reason had to do with a film deal gone south. So the Beatles and Apple Corps, which is their business name of their organization, they had been given exclusive rights by Maharishi to make a movie about TM and about Maharishi and about Maharishi's guru. But unfortunately, Maharishi had promised the same rights to someone else. 4-Star Productions of Hollywood. The lawyer from 4-Star Productions arrived in Rishikesh with a signed contract that gave exclusive rights to film Maharishi exclusively for the next 5 years. And then that film crew from 4-Star Productions arrived in Rishikesh. And one morning, John Lennon opened the door to his bungalow. He's bedheaded, he's bleary-eyed, he's looking out into the courtyard, and what is standing there in front of him? A cameraman and a director who yells, "Action!" So John and George are just horrified and exceedingly angry that now, without them knowing it, they're supposed to be 2-bit players in someone else's film. So they refused to leave their rooms. They wouldn't go to the lecture hall where the cameras and the lights were set up. And they were just furious. And they started to think that maybe Maharishi had been using them for publicity all along.
We're talking about the reasons why the remaining Beatles decided to leave India with Dr. Susan Shumsky. She's the author of Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru, and we'll continue this after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Why should you volunteer with Meals on Wheels?
I'll come to the door with one meal and I'll walk away with a full heart.
Drop off a warm meal and get more than you expect. Volunteer at americaletsdolunch.org. Brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Susan Shumsky. She's the author of Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. Now, before the break, we were talking about why John and George decided to leave India and leave the Maharishi on short notice. The first reason was you had mentioned a film deal, which seemed to have been given to someone else rather than the Beatles Corporation. And John woke up one morning to find this photographer waiting outside and said, action, and that was the first reason. What was the second and third reasons?
Well, the second reason had to do with a woman named Rosalind Bonas, who had been having an affair with Alexis Mardis at the ashram. His name was also known as Magic Alex. Magic Alex was a guy who really attached himself to John Lennon's hip. John Lennon introduced Magic Alex to the other Beatles as, quote unquote, my new guru, Magic Alex. Magic Alex wowed everyone by claiming to make all kinds of crazy inventions, like a house that would levitate and wallpaper that would have stereo speakers built into the wallpaper. And for Maharishi, he was going to build a radio transmission station that would carry his message throughout the world, and would be built in Rishikesh, India, in this primitive place in the jungle. All kinds of crazy inventions. He not only wowed the Beatles, he also wowed the Rolling Stones, and had made a light box for the Rolling Stones, which seldom worked. The reality was he was a TV repairman. But, you know, they were very impressed with him for some bizarre reason. And Cynthia, she said that she really disliked Magic Alex. And she said that he made her skin crawl. So he was quite a controversial guy. But he showed up in Rishikesh. He never meditated the entire time he was there. He was having an affair with this woman, Rosalind. And then he and Rosalind started telling everybody in the ashram that Maharishi had made a pass at her. And because of the fact that that rumor was spread, and already John and George were really angry with Maharishi about publicity, thinking that he'd been using them for publicity, and about this film, you know, they were even more angry when they found out that Maharishi had made a pass at this woman, Rosalind. And they stayed up all night arguing about it. And Magic Alex managed to talk them into the fact that this really happened. And he said, we must leave right away because Maharishi is a black magician and he's going to hex us. So he somehow managed to convince them, and he went and got taxis. And while he was getting the taxis, John Lennon wrote a song, and it was called Maharishi. And it included a lot of insults, a lot of expletives. It had horrible lyrics and very angry. He was taking out his anger on Maharishi through this song. And George said to John, you can't do that. What are you doing? You can't write a song like that. And so John changed the title of the song and changed some of the lyrics, and it became Sexy Sadie rather than Maharishi.
Sexy Sadie, you're the one, you made a fool of everyone. That was the initial lyric of that song. I remember that, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did the Beatles' departure have anything to do with Mia Farrow at all?
Nothing. Mia Farrow had left a month before. She had left on March 7th, and the Beatles left on April 10th. So she wasn't even there.
Okay.
But Mia Farrow had told people in the ashram previously that Maharishi had made a pass at her. And also she talked about it in her memoir as well, that Maharishi had made a pass at her. So that the Beatles did hear about that too, but that's not the reason they left. They left because of the film deal mainly, and also because of this affair, or not, I don't know if it was an affair, but this pass that Maharishi made with Rosalind Bonas.
Now, you share in Maharishi and Me that some other song titles are related to people who were in this community at the time. We know that you had said that Prudence was Mia Farrow's sister who was there. So, Dear Prudence, that's about her?
Definitely, Dear Prudence is about Prudence Farrow. So Prudence Farrow, when she was a teenager, she was abusing alcohol and drugs really severely. In fact, it was a really bad situation, and she, in fact, spent some time in a mental institution as a result of that. So then when she came to the ashram, she loved meditation. It really helped her so much, especially since she had had so many mental problems. But when she came to the ashram, all she wanted to do was just meditate, just keep her eyes closed and stay in meditation all the time. She hated the fact that she was in the Beatles complex because there was this noisy music going on all the time. And she was meditating so much and wouldn't come out, refused to come out of her room, that people got concerned about her. Maharishi asked John and George to just look after her and look in on her and so on. And she remembers John and George bursting into her room, singing Obla Di Obla Da and singing Sgt. Pepper. And so they were singing to her, but she just wanted them to go away and disappear so she could go back into meditation and be in silence. And then, unfortunately, she had a horrid mental breakdown while she was in India. She was having terrifying LSD flashbacks, and she was really in bad shape. But Maharishi brought her back from this abyss of insanity by having her come to his bungalow every day and having her do yoga exercises and just keeping her focused, and really just his energy was able to heal her within 3 weeks. And then she was fine at the end of her stay there. But just as George was leaving India, he told Prudence that John had written a song about her, and the song was Dear Prudence. And she didn't hear the song until she heard the White Album, but she was really glad when she heard it because she thought it was such a sweet song, and she was afraid that they were going to maybe make fun of her.
Mm. You share in the book that Maharishi made predictions about the Beatles and specifically John Lennon. What were those predictions?
Well, Maharishi said about George, he said George is the most advanced spiritually, and that this is his last life. And he said John Lennon has many more to go, many more lives to go, in other words, and must not give in to his weakness for women, or it will ruin him. Mm. He also told the Beatles that if they did not continue their meditation practice, that their band would break up.
And did the aftermath of their experience in Rishikesh lead to the Beatles' eventual breakup?
No, not the aftermath of their experience in India, but there was some infighting already. But what really broke the Beatles up, and I know this is going to be controversial, what I'm going to say, but from the people who were actually there, who were working with the Beatles at the time of the White Album, actually creating the White Album, they would concur with what I say, and that is the reason why the Beatles broke up was because Yoko Ono was there. She came into the sessions, and her presence was there. The Beatles had never allowed any of their girlfriends or wives to come into their sessions and intrude, and she was a very intrusive, disruptive factor, and that's the main reason why the Beatles did not stay together.
Now, in 1991, George Harrison apologized to the Maharishi. What prompted this?
It was in 1991 that George Harrison contacted Deepak Chopra. At the time, Deepak Chopra was very, very close to Maharishi. In fact, Maharishi had made Deepak Chopra's career. He sent him out to spread the message of Ayurvedic medicine throughout the world. He trained him in Vedic information and Vedic understandings, and he trained him to be a spokesperson for Transcendental meditation and for Ayurveda. So Deepak became extremely famous. Maharishi asked his followers to buy his books. Maharishi had millions of followers, so that launched Deepak into best-selling author status, New York Times best-selling author, and made his career. So he was very close to Maharishi at that time. And George asked if he could have an audience with Maharishi. So Deepak set it up. And they went to Vlodrop, Holland. That's where Maharishi was living at the time. And when they arrived, George gave Maharishi a rose, and they talked a little bit about John Lennon's death. And then they talked about, and then they sat in silence, actually. And then suddenly George said, Maharishi, I came to apologize. And Maharishi said, for what? And George said, you know why. And Maharishi said, well, tell Deepak the story. So George proceeded to tell Deepak that when they were in India, in Rishikesh, that some of the people in the Beatles party, some of the people that had come with the Beatles, that they were taking LSD and they were drinking alcohol, and that was very much not allowed in the ashram. And that because of that, Maharishi got angry at them and asked them to leave.
Dr. Susan Shumsky, her book, Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. Susan, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get the book and find out more about you.
Well, the book is available everywhere, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and in local bookstores. It's called Maharishi and Me, Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. My website is drsusan.org, drsusan.org. If you go there and register, you'll get a free mini meditation and guided meditation. And also I have another website, divinetravels.com. That's plural on the travels.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this wonderful experience.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Victor. I've enjoyed it tremendously.
And thanks for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.